What would you do if a letter from your HOA told you to tear down the windmill your dad built with his own hands and do it in 30 days, or else pay $100 every single sunrise until you obeyed? Imagine that you keep the lights on, pay your dues, mow on Saturdays, and some clipboard queen says your family's history is non-compliant. Me, I read that letter on my porch, felt the cedar rail under my palm, and thought, all right, wrong house, wrong woman. And yeah, I meant it. My name's Naomi Parker. Folks around Sunfield call me Nay. I'm in my early 50s, a former paramedic with a back that sings when rain's coming, and a knack for fixing things that squeak. My place sits at the edge of a cul-de-sac in the Texas Hill Country where limestone pushes up through the grass like old bones. The house ain't fancy, but it's ours. Mesquite shade out front. A porch swing, my daughter painted turquoise. And at the far corner of the lot, the thing the letter wanted dead, a red-bladed windmill with a stone cistern. Both built by my father in the late 1970s when drought taught everyone out here the difference between want and need. That windmill clacks gentle in a south breeze, like a metronome set to remember. It pumped water when the county line was a rumour and the power went out every other thunderstorm. Dad showed me how to grease the bearings, how to listen for the lazy tick that means a bolt's dreaming of coming loose. After he passed, that tower became the one place where his voice still reached me quiet. Practical, not big on speeches. When I stand at the base, I can feel him in the way the ground hums. Sunfield Ridge wasn't always an association. It used to be a handful of families, a gravel road, and a mailbox bank that leaned like a drunk. People waved with 2 fingers off the steering wheel and brought casseroles when your luck folded. Then some developer stamped street names on a drawing, poured sidewalks, and sold the sunset like it was a product. The brochure said curated hill country living. The fine print said homeowners association. Enter Karen. And yeah, I know the joke, but this one earned the name mid-40s, iced coffee in winter, heels on concrete, a smile you could shave with. She and her husband bought the biggest house on the ridge, all glass and angles. Then she ran for the board and won without breaking a sweat. Her first act was to change the logo. Her second was to hire a compliance consultant. Her third lucky me was a letter. Notice of violation structure, unapproved agricultural apparatus, windmill and stone water, containment, findings aesthetic nonconformity, potential safety hazard, negative impact on community brand, directive removed within 30 days, penalty $100 per day, plus administrative fees, lien eligibility upon continued non-compliance, community brand. I read that twice, like maybe the vowels would rearrange into something sane. I set the paper down, watched the blades turn, and felt the kind of heat that doesn't come from the weather. I walked that letter to the HOA office, which funny enough was Karen's white-on-white living room with a ficus that looked afraid to get dusty. She sat behind a sleek desk like a judge in a lifestyle magazine. Afternoon. I said, this here tower was up before there was a gate, before there was a sign, before there were mailers calling this place Ridge instead of Road. It's safe. It's ours. She smiled at me like I'd brought a stray dog into her kitchen. We appreciate your heritage, Naomi. But the board has adopted a modern aesthetic. Rustic elements, the way she said elements, made me want to scrub. Do not align with the vision. What vision's that? I asked. The kind where the wind blows pretty but doesn't do any work. If you'd like to appeal, she chirped, you can present at our next meeting. I should warn you, we rely on expert evaluations. Who's experts? Independent. She said too quick. I left before my mouth said something my Sunday self would regret. On the way home, Mr. Earl, my neighbour, with the kind eyes and a mower, older than some mortgages, raised a hand from his porch. Get one of those letters. Nay. Sure did. He spat into the gravel. They came from my rain barrels last month. Called them unsightly. I told him the sky's uglier when you ain't got water. The appeal took place in the clubhouse, which smelled like lemon cleaner and fear. Karen arranged chairs in neat rows facing a folding table dressed in white cloth like it was a wedding for people who love clipboards. Beside her sat 2 board members in matching polos and a man with a slick haircut and a polo that said Hill Country Risk and Aesthetics. I swear to you, that's what it said. I brought what my dad raised me to carry into any argument proof. A folder with the original county permit from the late 1970s. A letter from an engineer friend who swung by, climbed the ladder, and stamped sound on the guts. Photos of Dad teaching me to oil the shaft when I was 9. My legs skinny. My grin, missing a tooth. I laid it all out. Karen slid a glossy report back across the table. Our consultant has identified multiple hazards. She said the report had more stock photos than substance. And the site photo of my tower was shot from a low angle on a windy day to make it look like a monster. The letterhead, the consultant shared a last name with Karen's husband. You can't write it better. I'm not a lawyer. I said, but y'all don't get to call family independent. She tapped the gavel. Oh, yes. There was a gavel like she was swatting a fly. We will proceed to vote. Hands went up like they'd rehearsed in the mirror. Unanimous. 30 days. I walked out into heat that made the road squirm. My phone buzzed. Text from my daughter, Ivy. She's in nursing school 2 towns over. You okay? Ma, I stared at the tower and typed back. I'm fine. Then I deleted it and typed, I'm mad. She sent a red heart and a knife fork emoji like, feed the anger something true. That night, I brewed coffee like it was a weapon and drove to the county records office. Paper never blinks. I dug through plats and permits until my eyes had that sandpaper feeling. There it was, the original permit. Sure. But also a map labelling our lots as small agricultural homesteads. A designation that persisted until the association formed. And in the HOA's own bylaws, if you read past the pages about mailbox fonts, there was a sentence so beautiful I wanted to frame it. Legacy structures and utilities established prior to the association shall be exempt from aesthetic conformity requirements, provided they do not present an immediate danger and are maintained in working order. Immediate danger. This tower had stood through winds that peeled shingles off Karen's imported roof tile. Maintained the grease under my nails, could testify. I made copies. Lots. Highlighted like a high schooler who just discovered the colour yellow. When I got home, I found something uglier than meeting's the first fine for my non-compliant trash can position. The can had sat in the same corner for a decade. 2 days later, a letter about visible tools because my wrench rolled under the truck and I left the kit open. Then unsightly storage because Mr. Earl had parked his mower by my fence while he ran in to use the restroom. It wasn't compliance. They were playing whack-a-human. I took a breath. Called a friend, Maria Lopez, a straight-shooting attorney who used to run calls with me back when the ambulance smelled like burnt coffee and adrenaline. Bring everything, she said, and buy a big binder At her kitchen table, Maria flipped pages, nodded, slow. They're banking on you not reading. Most folks don't, but you did. Good. She tapped the legacy clause. This is your shield. And this, she said, pointing to the independent cousin consultant, is their Achilles heel. Think they'll back off? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. Bullies don't step back. They slip. The next meeting looked different because I showed up with people, not a mob, neighbours, Mr. Earl, hat in hand, Miss Dot from 3 houses down, the one who feeds strays and scares coyotes with a broom, a teen named Luis who mows half the block and once helped me lift a water heater like a champ. People who don't usually speak into microphones cleared their throats and did anyway. I read the clause. Slowly, I handed out copies with the line highlighted, so thick you could see it from the cheap seats. Maria sat in the back like a calm storm. Karen smiled so hard it looked like it hurt. While we respect the past, she said, we must prioritise safety and property values. Our expert, your husband's cousin, Miss Dot interrupted, loud as a church bell. Baby. You can't call that expert with a straight face. Snickers. A few gasps. Luis, bless him, added, if the windmill's so dangerous, how come y'all used a picture with a filter? Karen banged the gavel again. Bang. Bang. Decorum. She snapped. Maria stood, Madam Chair, under section whatever and ever. Your board cannot overrule legacy utilities in good repair without demonstrating immediate danger. You don't have that. You do have a conflict of interest. If you continue, you expose the association to liability. A board member I'd never heard speak lifted his hand like it weighed something. Maybe we table this. He said, voice thin. Karen shot him a look that could sour milk. We vote now. They did. Of course. Hands up. Unanimous. Again. All right. I said, gathering papers. You pick litigation over neighbours. Noted. That night, a dark sedan idled by my curb long enough to make the cat nervous. The next morning, a violation arrived. My porch swing was non-approved colour. Turquoise. Apparently, threatened civilization. I laughed so I wouldn't spit nails. Then I went to Home Depot, the big orange store, and bought 2 more cans of the same paint. Sometimes the only sane response to nonsense is doubling the turquoise. A week ticked down. 2. I kept working the land the way Dad taught me. Cistern, cap sealed. Overflow, checked. Blades, balanced. The tower talked in the wind like a metronome. Steady. 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 Fines stacked like junk mail. I started tucking them into clear sleeves in the binder like I was scrapbooking a war. Then the first real ugly thing happened. Fresh saw marks on the tower's ladder, bright silver against old steel. Not wind, not time, human hands. Call it in, Maria said, and buy cameras. Deputy Ramsey came out, took photos, wrote notes while I kept my hands in my pockets so I wouldn't shake. He peered up the tower, whistled low. Whoever did this knows just enough to be dangerous. He said, we'll add patrols. I mounted a little camera under the eave that night, and another in the mesquite, eyes trained on the Windmill's legs. The footage for the first few nights was raccoons washing their sins in my bird bath and the neighbour's cat auditioning for a nature documentary. Then, 3 nights later, the camera caught a figure in a hoodie pacing the fence, flashlight shaded in a palm. Like television taught them, they kept their face turned away, but the walk looked like somebody used to giving commands and not hearing no. Mister. Earl said when we watched the clip. That's a Karen walk. I didn't say it, but I saved the file in 3 places. The 3rd week, something shifted small, but you could feel it like a pressure change before a storm. People started knocking. Miss Dot brought a pie and a stack of her own letters. Louis lugged in a banker's box from his mama finds for a kiddie pool that never existed. A warning for a chalk hopscotch grid. A photo of her azalea bush circled like a crime. Mister. Earl set down a coffee tin full of receipts from consultants the HOA had charged to his dues over the years. The tin clinked like a piggy bank with a bad attitude. We spread everything across my dining table. Patterns show themselves if you give them room. The same last names popped up on invoices and email signatures. The same phrases repeated in expert reports, copy-paste mistakes, like they forgot to change the address, the bylaws about legacy stuff ignored, like they'd fallen through a crack in their perfect floor. Louis leaned over the mess, eyebrows up. We could recall them, right? Bylaws say we can. Maria answered, take signatures. Miss Dot cracked her knuckles like thunder. Baby, I've been collecting recipes and grudges since 1989. I can collect signatures. Ivy texted while we worked, Ma. You eating, I sent a picture of pie and chaos. She sent a string of heart emojis, and 1 knife, my girl. We didn't make posters. We made visits, porch to porch, voice to voice. We didn't sell rage. We sold sleep. You tired of being scared to leave a rake on the lawn, mister? Earl would ask, hat in his hand. You tired of paying for somebody's cousin to tell you your life's ugly? Miss Dot would chime in. Sign here, baby. Louise translated and smiled. The smile that gets old ladies to hand over their best cookie recipes. Me, I held the binder open to the legacy clause and let paper speak. Karen noticed. Of course she did. The next newsletter had a deer in soft focus on the cover and a letter from the president warning of outside influences sowing division. Outside influences meaning the people who live here and finally grew a spine again. She called my windmill an agricultural relic incompatible with the modern vision. I pasted that phrase into the scrapbook for days when I need a laugh. Week 4, the 30-day deadline. A last letter, final notice removal schedule, costs to be assessed to homeowner. They thought they could hire a crew and bill me for killing my father's work. I set the paper on the porch swing, watched the blades turn in the evening light, and felt something click in my chest like a seatbelt. Okay. I told the tower, we'll do it the other way. See, Sumfields Creek isn't just a pretty line on the map. It's part of a managed drainage easement that ties into county infrastructure at the culverts under Farm Road, whatever. The cistern my father built feeds a drip line that supports native grasses along the swale. It's not rogue. It's stewardship. I had paperwork. I had photos of bluebonnets blooming where the line runs. Butterflies, like confetti on a good day. I had a letter from the county water district, a board engineer who perked up when he read pre-association rain harvest and wrote back, maintain, beneficial, do not remove. Maria smiled when she saw it. You've got more than a shield now. She said, You've got a reason. The recall petition crossed the signature threshold on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of day when the sun gives up and the clouds roll in like they're late for dinner. We filed it per the little rule book Karen never imagined someone else would use. She called an emergency meeting and tried to bury it in process. Maria stood calm as a loaded truck at a green light and said, "No." The room murmured like a hive. I could end this first chapter by telling you the vote happened fast and the gavel fell hard. It didn't. Bullies stall. They toss every pebble in the road and call it a mountain. But the thing about windmills, they keep turning when you're tired because the wind doesn't ask permission. And the thing about neighbours finally waking up, they don't go back to sleep just because somebody says brand. So here's where we are. At the end of my first telling, the deadline passed. The tower still stands. The fines keep coming. The binder's full. The recall clock has started. And the wind keeps saying, steady, steady, steady. Tomorrow, I'll grease the bearings, bake Miss Dot a thank you loaf, and knock 3 more doors with Luis and Mr. Earl. And if a sedan idles by my curb, I'll wave, bless your heart, cameras work at night. Tell me, what would you do if your HOA came for the thing that holds your family story together? Fold. Or, dig in like limestone and make him learn the word legacy out loud. The recall petition sent shockwaves through Sunfield Ridge. You could feel it in the air, like the ozone right before a thunderstorm. Folks who'd whispered on porches now spoke out loud in the grocery aisle. People who used to nod politely at board meetings suddenly looked Karen dead in the eye and asked questions she couldn't smooth talk her way around. Karen, of course, went on the offensive. Within days, glossy flyers showed up in mailboxes, each one featuring her staged smile next to words like preserving property values and protecting our vision. Down at the bottom, in smaller print, don't let outsiders divide us. Outsiders meaning me, a woman who'd lived on this road since before it had pavement. Walt, my neighbour from 3 doors down, slapped one of the flyers onto my porch table and barked a laugh. If you're an outsider, I'm the Queen of England. Careful, I said, sipping coffee. They'll fine you for improper crown height. The intimidation campaign cranked higher. Evelyn, the 78-year-old with the bird bath, got a violation for standing water-breeding pests. It was the same bird bath she'd had since her wedding in 1969. Luis's mama got a warning about non-uniform curtains because she hung a quilt her aunt made in the front window. And I got hit with 3 violations in a single week. Porch swing, colour clash, firewood stack visible from street, and my truck inoperable because I left the hood up while changing oil. Non-operational vehicle. The letter said, I started stapling the fines to the wall of my garage like hunting trophies. But here's the thing, fear has an expiration date. One Friday night, Miss Dot marched into my kitchen with a casserole dish in one hand and a stack of signatures in the other. Baby, she said, we're past scared. We're mad. Behind her came Earl with more paperwork, Luis with another box, and half a dozen other neighbours carrying their own stories. We spread everything across the dining table, letters, notices, invoices with the same last name printed again and again. See that, Maria said, pointing at an invoice marked consulting fee. That's Richard's trick. Not Karen's, but same game. Money flowing in circles. Translation, Earl asked, fraud? If you squint. Maria replied, at minimum. abuse of authority. The room buzzed. The recall vote was scheduled for mid-September in the community centre that usually hosted Zumba classes and potluck dinners. But in the weeks before, the atmosphere grew electric. Karen doubled down. She paraded around the neighbourhood in heels unsuited for gravel, telling anyone who'd listened that the agitators were destroying Sunfield Ridge. She even tried to charm Luis's grandma, who swatted the air with her cane and said in Spanish something that made Luis choke on his doctor, pepper from laughing. Meanwhile, we kept knocking doors. We felt like adding another stone to a wall that couldn't be pushed down. By the end of the second week, we had well over the required 51%. The night of the vote, the community centre was standing room only. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of nervous neighbours. Karen sat at the front table, lips tight, gavel within reach, like it was her personal security blanket. I sat toward the back, binder under my arm, pulse hammering. Maria leaned close and whispered, "Breathe. You've already won half the battle." The ballot box, a repurposed suggestion box with a slit cut into the lid, sat on a table in the centre. People lined up, one by one, marked their papers, dropped them in. The sound of each slip of paper was louder than thunder in my ears. When the last ballot fell, 3 volunteers carried the box to a side table. The whole room leaned forward as they counted. 1, 2, 3. Karen tapped her fingernails on the table like she could control the math by sheer will. Finally, the lead volunteer stood. Votes for Recall 82 against 21. For a beat. Silence. Then the room erupted cheers, clapping, even some tears. Earl whistled so loud it rattled the light fixtures. Luis pumped his fist in the air. Miss Dot hollered, "Hallelujah." Karen's face drained of colour. She stood slowly, lifted the gavel like she might swing it, then set it down with a sharp crack. "You'll regret this," she hissed, voice shaking. Then she stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. That night, neighbours gathered outside my boathouse with lanterns and folding chairs. No speeches, no agenda. Just folks sitting together, laughing, eating pie Miss Dot had baked, watching the windmill blades spin steady in the night breeze. Linda leaned against me and whispered, "We got our town back." And for the first time in months, I believed her. But a corner of me stayed cautious. Because if I'd learned anything, it was this: bullies rarely leave quietly. The days after the recall felt like fresh air after a storm. People smiled more. You could hear kids laughing on bikes without worrying some clipboard committee would fine their parents for obstructing sightlines. For the first time in months, I slept a full night without my jaw clenched. But, sure enough, Karen wasn't gone, like a snake that loses its skin. She slithered right back in a new form. 2 weeks later, a deputy knocked on my door. "Mrs. Parker," he asked, shifting his hat. "You've been served." I signed, shut the door, and opened the thick envelope. My stomach dropped. Karen was suing me personally, claims of defamation, harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She wanted damages, legal fees, and an order for me to remove the windmill anyway. Linda looked over my shoulder, then rolled her eyes, emotional distress. That woman lives for drama. Still, it rattled me. I'd faced angry patients, screaming sirens, wreckage on highways, but seeing my name typed in all caps on a lawsuit chilled me. I called Maria. She flipped through the pages, snorted, and said, "This is hot air, dressed in a suit. Judges see through it." And she was right. At the hearing, the judge barely let Karen's lawyer finish before saying, "Dismissed with prejudice. Case closed." Karen stormed out of the courtroom without a word, heels striking marble like firecrackers. We thought maybe, just maybe, she'd quit. But no, she switched tactics. One evening, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security camera. I opened the app and froze. 2 figures in hoodies crouched by the windmill, flashlight beams cutting across the ladder. One held a cordless saw. My heart slammed. I ran outside with a spotlight and yelled, "Hey!" The figures bolted, dropping the saw in the dirt, their truck fishtailing gravel as they tore off. The camera caught the plate number clean. Deputy Ramsey traced it to a landscaping crew Karen had used before. Both men got charged with attempted vandalism. Karen swore up and down she had no knowledge, but around Sunfield, nobody needed a detective to connect dots. Word spread fast. Neighbours muttered in line at the diner, shook their heads at the post office. The tide of opinion turned harder than ever, and meanwhile, the new board rolled up their sleeves and got to work. They froze all fines, opened the books, and boy, what a mess those books were. Consulting fees funneling straight into Karen's cousin's pocket. Administrative expenses paid to companies with no address. Thousands drained away while potholes sat unrepaired and the park swings rusted. At the first open meeting, Carla, the new chair, stood in front of the crowd, voice steady. "No more secrets. No more fear. This association works for you, not against you." Applause shook the walls. People clapped like they'd been waiting years. One evening in October, something happened that made me cry for the first time in this whole mess. The board voted unanimously to declare the Parker Windmill a community heritage landmark. They even commissioned a small bronze plaque. The day they screwed it into the stone base, neighbours gathered round, kids clapped. Miss Dot dabbed at her eyes, and Earl saluted like it was a flag. I laid my hand on the plaque, cool metal under my palm, and whispered, "You made it. Dad, you're safe now." Linda squeezed my shoulder, and for once, the tears came easy. But storms don't always roll in with thunderclouds. Sometimes they arrive as silence. One chilly November morning, Earl came banging on my door. Nay. He panted. "Come quick." We hurried down the trail to the dam. The chain across the service gate had been cut clean through. Deputy Ramsey crouched low, running a finger over the marks. "Fresh," he said. This wasn't kids. Someone knew what they were doing. If they'd opened that gate wrong, the water could have dropped fast, destabilising the shoreline. It could have damaged the windmill, flooded basements, hurt people. Standing there in the cold air, anger burned hotter than fire. "She's not done." I muttered. Ramsey looked me in the eye, and neither are we. That night, I sat by the windmill with a lantern glowing soft on the stone. The blades turned steady above me, whispering through the dark. I thought of my father's hands, oil-stained, but sure, of my daughter, sending me hearts and knives in texts of neighbours bringing casseroles and signatures, standing shoulder to shoulder when fear said, sit down, and I swore out loud, you're not going anywhere. Not while I'm breathing. The tower creaked once, like it agreed. December settled heavy over Sunfield Ridge. Nights came early, and with them came a hush that should have felt peaceful but didn't. Folks were still spooked after the dam sabotage. Neighbours checked locks twice. Porch lights stayed on all night, and every engine noise down the road had us peeking through curtains. Then, just when we thought things might cool off, another blow landed. A certified letter arrived, this time not from the HOA, not even from Karen directly, but from the State Environmental Office. Karen had filed a complaint claiming the windmill leached contaminants into the ground and that the cistern was a public hazard. I almost laughed. It was that absurd. This tower pulled clean water, same as it had for 40 years. No leaks, no rust, nothing but good hill country, limestone filtered water. But I didn't laugh long, because state paperwork has teeth. Maria sat at my kitchen table, flipping through the complaint with a tired sigh. She's getting desperate. But, desperate people can still cause trouble. We'll need proof tests, reports, expert letters. Fine. I said, we'll bring the whole truth in a dump truck if we have to. Turns out, the truth didn't need a truck. Just a scientist named Dr. Reyes, a hydrologist at the local university. He ran tests, checked the soil, took water samples. His verdict, cleaner than most municipal systems. He even smiled when he saw the drip line feeding wildflowers by the creek. This windmill is doing more good for the watershed than half the development upstream. We bundled all of it into a report thicker than a phone book and sent it back to the state. Within a week, the complaint was tossed. Case closed. Karen's credibility took another nosedive. Meanwhile, the board leaned into rebuilding. They created what they call the Sunfield Fund, taking the money that used to fuel fines and putting it toward real needs. The first grant helped Evelyn reinforce her porch steps. Another paid for fresh swings at the park. They even hired Luis part-time to mow community areas, paid him fair too, instead of threatening violations. At meetings, instead of stiff silence, there was chatter. Neighbours brought cookies. Kids drew on scrap paper in the back. People laughed. For the first time, the HOA felt like community one evening. Earl leaned over and said, "Feels like we finally kicked the snake out of the garden." I nodded, but the back of my mind whispered, "Snakes don't stop slithering just because you don't see them." Sure enough, a week before Christmas, another shadow fell. Ramsey knocked on my door, hat low against the cold. "Naomi? Thought you should know. We've traced the payment for that damn sabotage. Bank transfer out of an account belonging to Karen. I finished for him." He nodded grimly. Charges are being filed. Won't be prison time, but it'll cost her, and it bars her from serving on any board tied to property governance. For a moment, I just stood there, the weight of months lifting like fog. So it's done. Legally. Yeah. But TV cameras on. Christmas Eve. We held a gathering by the Windmill. Somebody strung lights up the tower. And when the blades turned, they glowed like a slow, steady star. Families brought thermoses of cider. Carols floated on the cold night air. And kids chased each other until their cheeks turned red. Linda leaned against me, smiling, soft. Looks like a postcard, doesn't it? I nodded, throat tight. Best one I've ever seen. For the first time in nearly a year, I believed it we'd won. But victories leave echoes, and even as peace settled over the ridge, I knew our story wasn't just ours anymore. Folks from other towns were calling, writing, asking how we did it. One man in Arizona wrote, "They fined me for my rain barrel. Your fight gave me the guts to push back." I sat by the fire that night, reading those letters, and thought maybe this fight was bigger than Sunfield. Maybe it was about telling people everywhere you don't have to bow. Standing under the Windmill on New Year's Eve, lantern light dancing off the blades, I whispered to my father, "We made it through, and we're not just surviving, we're teaching others how to stand." The tower creaked, steady as ever, like it approved. January rolled in, sharp and cold, but Sunfield Ridge felt warmer than it had in years. Neighbours who once tiptoed around each other now waved, stopped to chat, even swapped tools. The air wasn't thick with fear anymore. It was thick with life. Carla and the new board launched something they called Neighbour Days once a month instead of a meeting with agendas and gavels. We all met at the park with crockpots, picnic blankets, and stories. Kids played tag while adults traded seeds, swapped recipes, and complained about the weather instead of the HOA. It felt like a reset, like we'd clawed our way back to the kind of community Sunfield used to be before developers branded it, and the Windmill. It became a symbol. People started using it as a meeting spot. Teens took graduation photos under its red blades. Couples strolled the trail and stopped to read the new bronze plaque declaring it a heritage landmark. Sometimes I'd see strangers pull over, roll down their windows, and snap a picture. I didn't mind. Let them. This tower had survived storms, sabotage, and lawsuits. Now it stood tall for anyone who needed to remember history matters. One afternoon in February, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. My stomach tightened. It looked too much like Karen's style. But out stepped a man in a county jacket, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Parker." He asked, "Name's Alan. I'm with the Regional Preservation Office." For a split second, I thought, here we go again. But then he smiled. "We're here to let you know the Parker Windmill has been officially added to the county's heritage registry. Congratulations." He handed me a certificate with a gold seal. I stared at it, blinking hard, then laughed out loud. "Well, Dad," I muttered, "you just got promoted." Linda hung the certificate in the living room that night, right above the fireplace, front and centre. She said, "So nobody forgets." By March, the Windmill's fame reached farther than we expected. A local paper ran a feature titled "The Windmill That Wouldn't Fall," not long after my mailbox filled with letters. One was from a woman in Colorado. They told me to rip out my wildflower garden. Your story gave me courage to fight. Another came from Florida. Our HOA banned front yard clotheslines. We're organising now, thank you. I sat on the porch swing, stack of letters in my lap, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a message rippling outward. Still, old habits de-slow. I'd find myself double-checking the cameras some nights, listening for cars idling too long, trauma sticks. But each morning, when I heard the blades clacking steady in the breeze, I reminded myself we stood up, we won, and life kept blooming. In April, the board hosted the first Spring Heritage Fair. Booths lined the park quilts, honey jars, woodworking, old photos. Lewis painted a mural of the windmill with kids flying kites around it. Evelyn set up her bird bath on a pedestal, grinning like a queen as folks dropped coins in for charity. As the sun set, Carla gathered everyone by the windmill. Lanterns glowed against its red blades. She raised her voice. This isn't just about saving a structure. It's about saving who we are. She handed me the mic. My throat tightened. But I managed. All I did was refuse to tear down what my dad built. The rest, that was all of you neighbours standing together. And if we can do it here, anybody can. The applause rolled across the ridge like thunder. That night, as folks drifted home, Earl lingered by the cistern, running a hand along the stone. Funny, he said, voice low. They tried to erase this place, and now it's the heart of everything. I nodded. That's what happens when people stop being scared. But let me ask you, if your HOA came for your family's history, the thing that holds your memories together, would you give in? Or would you stand tired but unbending until the storm broke? Because me, I stood, and I'd do it again tomorrow. May rolled in with wildflowers and the smell of mesquite smoke drifting from backyard grills. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sunfield Ridge wasn't bracing for the next fight. It was breathing. Kids played in sprinklers. Neighbours waved without suspicion. And folks even started leaving their garage doors open again while tinkering on Saturday mornings. You could tell the fear was fading, and every time the windmill blades clacked steady overhead, it felt like a drumbeat saying, "We made it. We made it." That month, the board launched a program that would have been unthinkable under Karen Neighbour to Neighbour Aid. Instead of mailing fines, they collected small donations and used them to help residents fix roofs, buy school supplies, even cover medical rides. When Earl's mower finally gave up the ghost, the fund chipped in for a new one. He stood in the park at the next meeting, a hat in his hands, voice shaking as he said, "First time in years I feel like this place cares more about me than my mailbox." People clapped until his ears turned red. June brought the second big Heritage Festival. The windmill was decorated with banners painted by the neighbourhood kids. Booths sold peach cobbler, brisket, and lemonade so sweet your teeth ached. A fiddler played under the oak tree, and folks danced like they hadn't in decades. As the sun dropped, lanterns lit the path to the windmill. Carla took the mic and said, "Last year, This tower was a target. This year, it's our beacon. She turned to me. Naomi, would you do the honor? I stepped forward, palms sweating, and pulled the rope to light the lanterns strung up its frame. The blades turned slow, glowing golden against the night. People cheered, kids whooped, and for a moment it felt like every hardship had been worth it. Linda leaned close, whispering, "Looks like your dad just got a front row seat to a carnival." I laughed through a lump in my throat, but not everything was carnival. Late that summer, a glossy packet arrived in our mailboxes. A developer out of Dallas was scouting land across the ridge. Their pitch, a luxury spa resort bringing modern elegance to the hill country. The reaction was instant. Some folks panicked, worried about traffic, taxes, losing the peace we'd fought to restore. Others shrugged, thinking it might mean better shops or property values. At the next board meeting, the air was tense. Carla stood tall and said, "We've been here before. We know what outside money can do to a community, but now we know how to stand together." Earl grunted from the back. "If they want to pave over our wildflowers, they'll have to come through me first." Cheers followed. Even the newcomers, families who'd only lived here a year, nodded along. Meanwhile, letters kept arriving from out of state. A man from Arizona wrote, "They fined me for a tomato garden. After hearing about your windmill, we're organising a recall." A woman from Georgia said, "We lost our grandfather's shed to HOA rules. Reading your story makes me wish we'd fought harder." I sat on the porch swing one evening, reading them under the soft whir of the blades, and felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that our fight gave hope. Sorrow that so many others were still living under fear. By August, the windmill had become more than a landmark. It was a pilgrimage site for neighbours looking for courage. I'd catch folks just standing there, hand on the stone base, eyes closed like they were gathering strength. One evening, a boy about 10 walked up while I was greasing the bearings. He asked shyly, "Miss Parker, is it true your dad built this with his own hands?" I nodded. Every bolt, every stone. He grinned wide. "That's cool. I want to build something that lasts too." I patted the ladder. "Start with small things. If they're built with love, they'll last longer than you think." His smile lit up the dusk, and I thought, that's the real inheritance. Not just the tower, but the lessons it teaches. So let me ask you, if your HOA tried to erase the thing that carried your family's story, would you hand it over? Or would you stand, tired but stubborn, until the wind itself testified for you? Because me, I stood, and the windmill still turns. September came in with cooler mornings, cicadas fading, and kids dragging backpacks down the street again. Life in Sunfield Ridge had found a rhythm, and for once that rhythm wasn't dictated by fines or letters. The windmill stood steady at the edge of the cul-de-sac, blades clacking in the breeze like a metronome, keeping time for the whole neighbourhood. Sometimes I'd catch myself just standing there, coffee in hand, listening. Every creak said, "We're still here." That fall, the board tried something new, story night, Neighbours gathered in the park with lawn chairs and blankets, lanterns strung through the trees. Folks took turns telling tales how they'd first come to Sunfield, memories of storms weathered, recipes handed down, even embarrassing mishaps. When it was my turn, I talked about the summer my dad and I climbed that tower together to replace a blade. I was 12, terrified, but he tied a rope around my waist and said, "Courage ain't never the absence of fear. Nay, it's climbing anyway." The crowd was quiet, listening close. Lewis leaned forward, eyes wide, and Evelyn dabbed at her cheeks. When I finished, the applause felt warmer than a fire. Meanwhile, the Dallas developer hadn't given up. Representatives showed up at a board meeting in shiny suits, passing out brochures filled with glossy photos of pools and spas. They promised jobs, tourism, economic growth. Carla let them speak, then calmly asked, "And what happens to our water table, to our wildlife, to our peace?" They dodged. They smiled. They shuffled papers, but the room wasn't buying it. Earl stood up and growled. "We already fought one bully. Don't think we won't fight another." The crowd roared with applause. The suits left looking rattled. October brought the second lantern walk. Kids carried jars with candles. Adults strung lights from porch to porch. And the whole neighbourhood walked together to the Windmill. There, we sang, we prayed, we laughed. Linda leaned into me, whispering, "Feels like we're writing new traditions. Feels like we remembered old ones." I said, because truth be told, this wasn't new. It was just community the way it used to be before curated aesthetics tried to bleach it out. But the echoes of the fight lingered. One night, I caught myself waking at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling, listening for car engines. Trauma doesn't leave easy, but instead of dread, I found myself muttering, "Try it. We're ready now." Because cameras were up, neighbours were watchful, and more than that, we had each other. By November, the county called again. Not only was the Windmill on the Heritage Registry, they wanted to nominate it for the State Historic List. A formal ceremony was scheduled for spring. When I read the letter out loud at the board meeting, the room burst into cheers. Evelyn raised her cane like a trophy. Lewis whooped loud enough to rattle windows. Carla wiped tears from her face, saying, "See legacy wins." That winter, letters from strangers kept coming. One from Michigan read, "They fined us for keeping chickens. After hearing your fight, we started our own petition." Another from California, "We've lived under HOA fear for 10 years. Your story gave us courage to say no more." Oh, I'd sit by the fire, reading them aloud to Linda. Sometimes we laughed. Sometimes we got quiet. Always, I felt humbled. Our little tower of red blades had become a rallying cry across the country. One icy night in December, I walked out to the Windmill alone, frost-coated the stone, and my breath curled in the air. I laid a hand on the plaque, cold under my palm, and whispered, "Dad, we did it. They tried to bury us, but we grew stronger. The tower creaked, steady as always, like it was agreeing. So here's my question for you. If your HOA came after your memories, would you let them, or would you climb rope around your waist, fear in your chest, and fight anyway? Because me, I climbed, and I'd climb again. January dawned bright and cold. The sky so clear, it looked scrubbed clean. I walked out with my coffee, boots crunching, frost, and paused at the windmill. Its blades turned slow, steady, whispering that same rhythm I'd come to trust was still here. We're still here. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel fear pressing down on me. I felt pride, relief, gratitude. Spring brought the big day, the state historic ceremony. The county set up a stage by the windmill. A brass band played, kids waved flags, and families brought folding chairs. Officials in suits gave speeches, but what mattered most was when they unveiled the new plaque. Parker Windmill, established 1978, preserved as a state historic landmark. The crowd cheered so loud it echoed across the ridge. Linda clapped until her palms turned red. Evelyn cried openly. And Luis took a dozen photos on his phone. When they handed me the microphone, my knees shook, but I steadied myself with a breath of mesquite-scented air. This windmill, I said, isn't just mine. It's ours. It's proof that no HOA rule, no bully, no threat can erase what families build with love. And if anyone here is facing their own fight, remember, this history is worth defending, always. The applause rolled like thunder. And I swear I felt my dad's hand on my shoulder. That summer, something unexpected happened. Families from outside Sunfield started visiting, driving out just to see the windmill that beat the HOA. Some stood quietly. Some took pictures. Some even prayed. At first, it felt odd. But then I realized they weren't just sightseeing. They were gathering courage. They wanted to see with their own eyes that ordinary people can win. One woman hugged me after they fined me for painting my shutters blue. She whispered, "I thought I was crazy to fight back. Now I know I'm not." Life in Sunfield Ridge moved on, but better. The board kept neighbour days alive. Kids grew up playing under the tower's shadow. And the fear that once haunted us turned into laughter and shared meals. One evening, sitting on the porch swing, Linda said, "Funny thing, Karen tried to tear this community apart. Instead, she knitted it tighter than ever." I chuckled. Guess even snakes serve a purpose sometimes. Now, every morning, I step out to the sound of the blades turning steady. I run my hand along the stone, feel the hum of history, and whisper, "We're still here. Because we fought." And that's what I want to ask you. If your HOA told you to tear down your memories, would you hand them over? Or would you stand stubborn as limestone until the storm passed and the truth stood taller than their rules? I know my answer, and every creak of these blades says it louder than words stand.